The warning lights on the bridge turned everything red. Captain Laura Bennett stood in the middle of the command room, looking at the screen in front of her. Outside the ship, dozens of alien vessels surrounded them like wolves around a single deer. The Defiant was alone, damaged, and running out of options. Her communications officer, a young man named Kyle Morrison, turned his chair to face her. His hands were shaking a little, but his voice stayed calm. "Captain, they're sending another message. Should I put it on the main screen?" Laura nodded once. She knew what was coming. The aliens had been very clear about what they wanted. They wanted humanity to give up, to surrender, to accept whatever fate the Zelthari Empire decided for them. She had seen what happened to the colonies that surrendered. She had watched the recordings of human worlds burning, of people being loaded onto ships and taken away to places unknown. The screen changed. An alien commander appeared, tall and covered in dark armor that looked like it was part of its body. Its voice came through the speakers, translated into English by the ship's computer. "Human vessel Defiant, this is your final warning. Your fleet is destroyed. Your homeworld is burning. You have no allies coming to save you. Surrender now, and we will give your crew a quick death. Fight us and we will make sure every one of you suffers before the end." The bridge went completely silent. Laura could hear the quiet hum of the engines, the soft beeping of the consoles, the breathing of her crew. Everyone was watching her, waiting to see what she would do. She thought about Earth. She had grown up there, in a small town where everyone knew each other. She remembered the smell of rain on summer days, the sound of her daughter laughing, the way the sun looked setting over the mountains. All of that was gone now. The Zelthari had attacked without warning, without mercy, without even trying to talk first. At the helm, Danny Pierce kept his eyes on his controls. He was the youngest person on the bridge, barely out of training, but he had flown this ship through 3 battles already. His hands never left the flight controls, ready to move the ship the moment Laura gave the order. Chief Engineer Megan Walsh stood at the back of the bridge. She had come up from the engine room when the aliens first surrounded them. Her uniform was dirty with oil and coolant, her face tired from 3 days of keeping the damaged ship running. But her eyes were sharp and alert. Ryan Carter sat at the weapons station. He was older than most of the crew, had fought in the border conflicts before the Zelthari came. His display showed that they had maybe 12 missiles left, and the main railgun was damaged. Not much to fight with against an entire fleet. Laura took a slow breath. She could surrender. She could save her crew from torture and pain. She could give the order, and they would all die quickly instead of slowly. It would be the smart choice. The logical choice. The choice that would cause the least suffering, but something deep inside her refused to accept it. Humanity had built ships and reached for the stars. They had overcome wars and disasters and diseases. They had looked at the impossible and done it anyway. And now, at the moment when everything seemed lost, she was supposed to just give up? No. She stepped forward, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. "Kyle, open a channel. Send it to every Zelthari ship out there." Kyle's fingers moved quickly over his console. "Channel open, Captain." Laura looked directly at the alien commander on the screen. She thought about every human who had died fighting. She thought about the colonies that had refused to surrender. She thought about the families hiding in shelters on Earth, hoping that someone, somewhere, was still fighting for them. "This is Captain Laura Bennett of the Earth vessel Defiant," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm, carrying the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. "You offered us terms. Now I'll offer you mine." She paused, letting her words sink in. She could see the alien commander shift slightly, probably confused by her response. "You will leave this system immediately. You will stop attacking human worlds. You will go back to whatever corner of space you came from and never return. If you refuse, we will keep fighting you. We will fight until either you are dead or we are dead. But we will never surrender to you. Not today. Not ever. The alien commander's face showed something that might have been surprise or anger. It was hard to tell with their features so different from human ones. You are one damaged ship against our entire fleet. You cannot win. This is madness. Laura smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Maybe it is madness, but it's our madness. You came here thinking we would be easy to conquer. You thought we would beg and cry and give up. You were wrong about us. And that mistake is going to cost you everything. She nodded to Kyle, who cut the transmission immediately. The bridge stayed quiet for a moment. Then Megan spoke up from the back. Captain, if we're doing what I think we're doing, I need to prepare the reactor. It'll take about 10 minutes to set up the overload sequence. Laura turned to face her chief engineer. Do it. Make sure it's big enough to take out as many of them as possible. Megan nodded and headed for the door. Before she left, she stopped and looked back. It's been an honor serving with you, Captain. The honor has been mine, Meg. Laura replied. After Megan left, Laura walked back to her command chair and sat down. She pressed a button that would send her voice to every part of the ship. All crew. This is the captain. You all know our situation. The Xelthari expect us to surrender. They think we'll beg for mercy. They believe that because they're stronger, we have to give them what they want. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But that's not who we are. We're human. We don't give up just because the odds are bad. We don't stop fighting just because someone tells us we can't win. What we do here today will be remembered. People across the galaxy will know that humanity doesn't surrender. We fight. We resist. We make them pay for every inch they try to take from us. Her voice grew stronger. It has been my greatest privilege to serve with all of you. You are the best crew I could have asked for. In a few minutes, we're going to show the Xelthari what happens when they underestimate humanity. Prepare for final approach. Bennett out. She released the button and looked at her bridge crew. Danny had his hands on the flight controls. Ryan was checking his remaining weapons. Kyle sat ready at communications. Helm, set course directly for their command ship, Laura ordered. Full speed. Danny's voice was steady. Course set, Captain. Ready on your command. Laura gripped the armrests of her chair. Outside, the Xelthari fleet was moving into attack positions. They still thought this would be easy. They still believed humans would break. They were about to learn differently. The Defiant shook as enemy weapons' fire lit up the space around them. Green beams of energy cut through the darkness, each one powerful enough to destroy a smaller ship. Danny Pierce pulled hard on the controls, making the vessel spin and dive like a bird avoiding a predator. The artificial gravity systems struggled to keep everyone on the floor. 3 near misses, Ryan Carter called out from his station. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us. They still want us to surrender. Laura watched the tactical display that showed all the enemy ships. The big command vessel sat in the middle, surrounded by smaller warships. It was huge. Maybe 10 times the size of the Defiant, with weapons covering every surface. A normal captain would run from something like that. Laura was flying straight toward it. Return fire, she ordered. Everything we have. Ryan pressed the firing controls. The Defiant's railgun spat metal slugs at incredible speed. The magnetic accelerators launched chunks of tungsten so fast they became like bombs when they hit. 3 of the smaller alien ships exploded in bright flashes of fire and debris. Got them, Ryan said with grim satisfaction. 3 confirmed kills, but there were still dozens more. And the big command ship hadn't even fired its main weapons yet. Kyle looked up from his station, his face pale but determined. Captain, the enemy commander is trying to contact us again. On screen, Laura said. The alien commander appeared again. This time, it looked angry. Its body language suggesting aggression, even though its features were so different from human ones. You destroyed 3 of my ships. That was unwise. I will now destroy you slowly, piece by piece, until you beg me to accept your surrender. Laura stood up from her chair and walked closer to the screen. She wanted the alien to see her face clearly, to understand that she meant every word she was about to say. You still don't understand. We're not going to surrender. We're going to ram your ship at full speed and turn our reactor into a bomb. We're going to take you and as many of your ships as possible with us. That's the only outcome here. The alien commander was quiet for a moment. Then it spoke. And for the first time, there was something like uncertainty in its voice. That would be suicide. Why would you throw away your lives for nothing? It's not for nothing, Laura replied. It's to show every human in the galaxy that we don't give up. It's to prove that you can be hurt, that you can be beaten. It's to make sure the next human ship you face knows exactly what to do. She paused. You came to our space expecting easy prey. Instead, you found predators. That's going to be a very expensive lesson for you. She signaled Kyle to cut the connection. The alien's face disappeared from the screen. Time to target? Laura asked. 2 minutes at current speed. Danny answered. His hands were steady on the controls, even though they all knew what was coming. Down in engineering, Megan Walsh worked quickly over the reactor controls. The fusion core that powered the ship was designed with multiple safety systems to prevent overloads. She was systematically disabling every single one of them. Next to her, 2 other engineers helped, their faces showing they knew exactly what they were doing. Chief, the containment field is showing strain, one of them said. If we push it much further, the whole thing could go critical before we're in position. Megan checked her readings. We need to hold it together for 90 more seconds. Reinforce the magnetic bottles, and pray they last. On the bridge, Laura pressed the ship-wide intercom again. She wanted everyone to hear this. Everyone to know what their sacrifice meant. This is the captain. In less than 2 minutes, we're going to hit the enemy command ship. When we do, Chief Walsh will trigger a reactor overload that will destroy everything within 50,000 kilometers. She took a breath, thinking about her crew. Most of them were young, with whole lives ahead of them. Some had families waiting at home. They all had dreams and plans for the future. All of that was ending in the next 2 minutes. I know what I'm asking of you, Laura continued. I know the cost. But I also know that what we do here matters. The Xelthari have conquered dozens of other species because those species gave up. They surrendered when they saw they were outnumbered. They chose survival over resistance. But we're choosing differently. We're showing them that humans would rather die fighting than live on our knees. Her voice grew emotional, but she kept it under control. Every person watching this, every human on Earth or Mars or any colony, they'll see what we did. They'll know we didn't surrender. They'll know we fought to the very end. And maybe, just maybe, that will inspire them to do the same. If enough of us fight like this, the Xelthari can't win. The math doesn't work for them anymore. She paused, looking at her bridge crew one last time. You are the bravest people I've ever known. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you, to fight beside you, to die beside you. History will remember the defiant. They'll remember that we stood when we should have fallen. They'll remember that we fought when we should have surrendered. And they'll remember that we were human. And that meant something. Laura released the intercom button and sat back down in her chair. Her hands gripped the armrests, so tight her knuckles turned white. 1 minute to impact, Danny called out. The Xelthari fleet had stopped firing. They seemed to understand now that this wasn't a bluff. The human ship was actually going to ram them. Laura could almost feel their confusion. This wasn't how wars were supposed to work. The losing side was supposed to recognize when they were beaten and give up. But humanity hadn't read their rulebook. 30 seconds, Danny said. Laura could see the enemy command ship growing larger on the screen. It filled the entire view now. A massive wall of metal and weapons. She could see the detailed armor plating, the gun ports, the observation windows. Somewhere inside that ship, the alien commander was probably still trying to understand what was happening. 15 seconds. Impact unavoidable. The Zelthari command ship finally seemed to understand. It tried to turn, to move out of the way, but it was too big and too slow. The Defiant was too close and moving too fast. "Megan, trigger the overload on my mark," Laura said into the engineering comm. "Ready, Captain." Megan's voice came back, calm and professional to the very end. 5 seconds, Danny counted down. 4, 3, 2, 1. "Now, Megan," Laura commanded. The world turned white. Down in engineering, Megan released the final safety on the reactor core. The magnetic containment fields collapsed. The fusion reaction, that had been carefully controlled for years, suddenly expanded without limits. In a fraction of a second, the core of the Defiant became as hot as the center of a star. The explosion was visible from planets on the other side of the solar system. A sphere of pure energy expanded outward at incredible speed. The Defiant vaporized instantly, every atom of the ship torn apart and converted to energy. The Zelthari command ship, massive and powerful, lasted barely a second longer before it too was consumed by the fireball. The shockwave hit the surrounding enemy vessels like a hammer. Ships that were too close simply exploded. Others had their shields overloaded, their hulls damaged, their systems fried by the electromagnetic pulse. In total, 18 Zelthari vessels were destroyed or disabled in the explosion, and it was all recorded by automated monitoring stations scattered throughout the system. Every second of the Defiant's last flight, every word Laura had spoken, every moment of their charge into certain death. The recording showed one small human ship, damaged. 3 days after the Defiant died, Admiral Helen Carter sat in a command bunker deep under the surface of Titan, one of Saturn's moons. The main command centers on Earth and Mars were gone, destroyed in the first weeks of the war. What remained of humanity's military leadership now worked from hidden facilities scattered across the solar system. The holographic display in front of Helen showed a map of human space. Red markers indicated systems under Zelthari control. Blue markers showed where human forces still fought. There was a lot more red than blue. But as Helen watched, she saw something that gave her hope. The blue markers weren't disappearing. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, human forces were still fighting. "Admiral, we've received a data transmission," said Lieutenant Kate Phillips, a young officer who had survived the destruction of Europa Station. It came from the Defiant's emergency beacon, sent in the seconds before the ship was destroyed. Helen stood up quickly. "Show me." The hologram changed to show Laura Bennett's face. The recording had been made hours before the final battle, probably when Laura knew what choice she was going to make. Helen had known Laura for 15 years. They had served together, fought together, become friends. Now, she was watching what were essentially her friend's last words. "If you're seeing this, we're gone," Laura's recorded image said. "But we died doing something important. We proved that the Zelthari can be beaten. One ship, barely holding together, with a crew of 43 people, and we destroyed their flagship, plus 18 other vessels. Think about that ratio, Helen." Laura leaned closer to the camera, her expression intense. "The Zelthari win their wars by making the enemy surrender. They hit hard, show overwhelming force, and every species they've conquered has looked at the odds and given up. But we didn't give up. We hurt them badly. And if every human ship, every station, every colony fights the way we did, they can't win. They don't have enough ships. They don't have enough soldiers. They've never faced an enemy that refuses to quit." The recording paused as Laura seemed to collect her thoughts. "I know the cost is terrible. I know we're asking people to sacrifice everything. But this is how we survive. Not by hoping the Zelthari will be merciful. Not by surrendering and praying they'll let us live. But by fighting. By making every victory they get so expensive that they can't afford to continue." Laura's face showed determination mixed with sadness. I'm sending you all our tactical data. Shield frequencies, weapon patterns, command structures, everything we learned about them. Use it. Share it with every ship captain, every station commander, every colony governor. Make sure every human knows what we discovered. Make sure they know what we did here. Groak. Groak. The recording showed Laura saluting. It has been my honor to serve under your command, Admiral. Tell my daughter I love her. Tell her I fought for her future. Defiant out. The hologram vanished. The command center was completely silent. Helen stood perfectly still, feeling the weight of Laura's sacrifice pressing down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Around her, other officers wiped tears from their eyes or stared at their consoles, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Finally, Helen spoke. How many people have seen this recording? It was broadcast on all emergency channels, Kate replied. By now, probably every human installation that still has working communications has received it. Helen nodded slowly. An idea was forming in her mind. A way to turn Laura's sacrifice into something bigger. Contact every ship captain we can reach, every station commander, every colony leader. I want them all on a conference call in 1 hour. Yes, Admiral, Kate said, immediately moving to carry out the order. For the next hour, Helen worked with her staff to prepare. They compiled all the tactical data from the Defiant. They analyzed the footage of the battle. They calculated casualty ratios and resource costs. When the conference call finally connected, Helen found herself looking at dozens of faces on split screens, ship captains with tired eyes, station commanders reporting from damaged facilities, colony governors who had barely escaped Xelthari occupation. Thank you all for joining, Helen began. By now you've all seen the recording from Captain Bennett and the Defiant. You've seen what they did. I want to talk about what it means. 1. She brought up statistics on the shared display. The Xelthari lost 19 ships to destroy the Defiant. That's a loss ratio they cannot sustain. If every engagement costs them that much, they'll run out of ships long before we run out of people willing to fight. But only if we all commit to the same strategy Laura used. A grizzled ship captain named Greg Mason spoke up. He commanded a destroyer that was currently hiding in the asteroid belt. Admiral, you're asking us to turn our ships into bombs, to send our crews on suicide missions. No, Helen said firmly. I'm asking you to fight. The Xelthari expect us to surrender when we're outnumbered. They expect us to value our lives more than our freedom. But if we refuse to surrender, if we make them pay in blood for every meter of space they take, the math changes. They're an empire with other enemies, other concerns. We just have to make conquering humanity too expensive to be worth it. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm implementing something called Protocol Defiance. It's simple. Every ship, every station, every armed facility is authorized to engage the enemy regardless of the odds. No retreats unless tactically necessary. No surrenders under any circumstances. Every commander has the authority to use any means necessary to inflict maximum damage on the enemy, including reactor overloads. The faces on the screens showed a range of emotions. Fear, anger, determination, resignation. One colony governor, a woman named Lisa Grant, spoke up. My colony has 12,000 civilians. If I commit to this protocol, and the Xelthari attack, they'll all die. Helen met her eyes through the video link. If you surrender, they'll die anyway. Or worse. We've seen what happens in the occupied colonies. The Xelthari don't want to coexist with us. They want to eliminate us or enslave us. At least if we fight, we hurt them. We make them remember that humanity doesn't go quietly into the dark. How long do we keep this up? Another captain asked. How many people have to die? Until they leave our space, Helen said simply. Until they decide that conquering humanity costs too much. The Xelthari are rational. They're an empire built on efficient conquest. When we stop being efficient to conquer, they'll move on to easier targets. She pulled up the tactical data from the Defiant one more time. Captain Bennett sent us everything they learned. Weak points in their shields. Patterns in their attack formations. Communication frequencies. We're distributing this to everyone. Use it. Learn from it. And when you fight, remember what the Defiant proved. They can be beaten. They can be hurt. They can be made to bleed. Helen's voice grew stronger, filled with emotion. I won't lie to you. Many of us are going to die. Maybe most of us. The cost will be terrible. But our children will live free. Our species will survive. And the Zelthari will learn that some prey fights back. That some species would rather die than kneel. That humanity means something. She stood up straighter, her uniform neat, despite the long days in the bunker. I'm authorizing Protocol Defiance effective immediately. Every commander has full discretion on tactics and engagement. Fight smart. Fight hard. Make them pay for every inch. And remember Captain Laura Bennett and the crew of the Defiant. They showed us the way. Now, we follow it. The conference call ended a few minutes later. Helen sat back down in her chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. Kate approached quietly. Admiral, that was inspiring. But do you really think it will work? Helen looked at the tactical display again. The red markers, showing Zelthari control, still outnumbered the blue. But now, she saw those blue markers differently. Each one represented humans who were choosing to fight rather than surrender. Each one was a potential Defiant, ready to hurt the enemy badly enough to matter. It has to work, Helen said quietly. Because the alternative is extinction or slavery. Laura gave us a weapon. The knowledge that they can be beaten if we're willing to pay the price. Now we use that weapon. Over the next few days, the effects of Protocol Defiance began to show. The Zelthari High Command Chamber was a massive room built to impress and intimidate. Its walls were covered in the battle honors of 100 conquered species. Holographic displays showed the extent of the empire, stretching across thousands of star systems. This was a place of power, of victory, of dominance. Today, it was filled with frustration and growing concern. Supreme Commander Vrix stood at the center of the chamber, its armored form reflecting the light from the displays. Around the circular room, other commanders sat in their designated places. These were the leaders of the Zelthari military, beings who had conquered entire civilizations without breaking a sweat. Explain this to me again, Vrix said, its voice carrying an edge of anger. We have destroyed the humans' main fleets. We have occupied dozens of their colonies. We have demonstrated our overwhelming superiority. Why are they still fighting? Fleet Commander Zenth stepped forward. It had been in charge of the human campaign from the beginning, and the stress was starting to show. The humans have adopted what they call Protocol Defiance. Every ship captain, every station commander, has authorization to fight to the death rather than surrender. They are using suicide tactics in every engagement. Another commander, a veteran of 30 campaigns, spoke up. Suicide tactics are not sustainable. Eventually they run out of ships and soldiers. This is simple mathematics. Is it? Vrix pulled up casualty statistics on the main display. The numbers glowed in the air for everyone to see. We have lost 143 ships since the incident with the vessel called Defiant. 143 ships in 6 weeks. That is more than we lost in the last 5 years of expansion combined. The chamber fell silent. The numbers were undeniable. Zenth continued the briefing. The humans discovered that we rely on surrender. Every species we have conquered has surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. The humans studied our tactics and realized that if they refuse to surrender, if they inflict maximum casualties in every engagement, the cost becomes unsustainable. So we simply kill them all, one commander suggested. No occupation, No prisoners. Complete extermination. That would require 5 times our current forces, Zenth replied. The humans have hundreds of colonies and installations spread across their space. They have hidden bases we haven't found. They have civilian ships converted into weapons. Exterminating them completely would take years and cost us thousands of ships. Vrix studied the tactical maps floating in the air. Red markers showed Zelthari-controlled space. Blue markers showed ongoing human resistance. The blue markers were scattered, isolated, clearly losing, but they weren't disappearing. What about their morale? Surely they must be close to breaking point. Zenth played a recording. It showed a human ship, small and damaged, broadcasting a message as it charged toward a Zelthari battle group. The human captain spoke calmly, without fear, explaining exactly what they were about to do and why. Then the ship detonated its reactor, destroying itself and 3 Zelthari vessels. This was yesterday, Zenth said. The transmission was picked up by other human forces. They treat these events as inspiration, not as warnings. Each suicide attack makes the others more determined to fight. Another commander shifted uncomfortably. This is irrational behavior. They cannot win. Why do they persist? Because they do not need to win. Vrix said quietly, understanding dawning. They only need to make victory. Too expensive for us to afford. The Supreme Commander walked to the central display and expanded the view to show the entire Zelthari Empire. It was vast, but it was also surrounded by potential enemies. Species that were being watched carefully, border regions that required constant patrols, internal problems that needed resources. We committed a quarter of our total military force to the human campaign, Vrix continued. That is a quarter of our ships that cannot respond to other threats. That is a quarter of our resources tied up in a war that should have been over in weeks, not months. And for what? To control human space that is costing us more to occupy than it provides in value? Are you suggesting we withdraw? One commander asked, shocked. I am suggesting we evaluate the cost, Vrix replied. We are an empire. We expand through efficient conquest. We hit hard, offer generous surrender terms, and assimilate or eliminate. The humans have broken that model. Every colony we occupy requires forces to suppress ongoing resistance. Every space lane we control is subject to raids by civilian vessels turned into weapons. We are not conquering the humans. We are bleeding ourselves dry trying to hold them down. Zenth brought up more statistics. Our casualty ratios are catastrophic. For every human ship we destroy, we lose an average of 3 vessels. For every colony we occupy, we lose hundreds of soldiers to ongoing resistance before we can establish control. The humans have calculated that if they maintain these ratios, we will exhaust our available forces in approximately 8 more months. And they are correct, Vrix said flatly. We cannot sustain this campaign for 8 more months, not without leaving other parts of the Empire vulnerable. The chamber erupted in argument. Some commanders insisted they needed to finish what they started. That withdrawing would make the Empire look weak. Others pointed out that continuing the campaign was making them actually weak, not just in appearance. Vrix let them argue for several minutes before calling for silence. We need to understand what happened here. We did not lose to superior technology. We did not lose to better tactics. We lost to will. The humans simply refused to accept that they were beaten. The Supreme Commander brought up images from occupied human colonies. In every one, there were signs of ongoing resistance. Buildings damaged by sabotage. Zelthari patrols under constant threat. Supply lines disrupted. We are not occupiers here. We are under siege in our own conquered territory. This is not sustainable. Under siege. Under siege. What about our reputation? A commander asked. If we withdraw from human space, other species will think they can resist us too. Other species already know they can resist, Vrix said. Our intelligence reports that several client species have seen the human broadcasts. They are asking themselves why they surrendered when they could have fought. We are creating doubt in our own empire. Zenth added more information. The humans broadcast everything. Every battle. Every last stand. Every time one of their ships destroys ours. Those broadcasts reach not just other humans, but other species throughout this region of space. They are inspiring resistance we will have to deal with later. Vrix made a decision. It was not easy, but it was necessary. We will begin withdrawal from human space. Gradual and organized. We will maintain defensive positions at the border, but we will not advance further. The chamber exploded with protests, but Vrix's voice cut through the noise. This is not surrender. This is strategic reassessment. We are an empire built on efficient conquest. The humans have made themselves inefficient to conquer. We are spending resources we need elsewhere on a campaign that brings us nothing but casualties. The Supreme Commander looked at each of the other commanders in turn. The humans wanted us to leave their space. We will do so, not because they defeated us militarily, but because they made victory too expensive. Let this be a lesson. Overwhelming force only works against enemies who fear death. The humans do not fear death. They fear surrender more. In the weeks that followed, Jelthari forces began their withdrawal from human space. It was slow and careful, with defensive positions maintained at every step. The humans did not make it easy. Every retreating Zelthari ship faced attacks. Every abandoned colony saw celebrations and calls for continued resistance. Commander Greg Mason stood in the ruins of New Perth Colony, watching the last Zelthari ships leave orbit. His forces had held out for 7 weeks of siege. They had fought with everything they had, suffered terrible casualties, but never surrendered. Now, the aliens were leaving. They're really going, Lieutenant Amy Brooks said beside him, her voice filled with disbelief. They are, Greg confirmed. Laura Bennett was right. Make it too expensive, and they give up. Around them, colonists emerged from underground shelters. They looked at the sky, seeing it clear of enemy ships for the first time in months. Some cheered. Some cried. Some just stood in silence, processing what had happened. Greg thought about all the people who had died to reach this moment. All the ships that had been lost. All the colonies that had burned. The cost had been enormous, but they had won, not through superior weapons or tactics, but through sheer refusal to give up. The last Zelthari ship crossed the border of human space exactly 3 months after the withdrawal began. Across hundreds of worlds, billions of humans watched the tracking displays as the red markers finally moved beyond their territory and stopped. The war was over, not with a peace treaty or formal surrender, but with the enemy simply deciding that humanity was too much trouble to conquer. Admiral Helen Carter stood in what was left of Luna Command, looking at Earth hanging in the black sky above. The planet bore scars from the war. Orbital platforms were destroyed. Cities had been bombed. Entire regions had been evacuated. But Earth survived. Humanity survived. Final casualty reports are coming in, Kate Phillips said quietly, standing beside her. 47 million dead. 38 colonies destroyed or severely damaged. 16 capital ships remaining out of 73. Industrial capacity at approximately 30% of pre-war levels. Helen closed her eyes for a moment. 47 million people, each one someone's child, parent, friend, loved one. Each one, a life that could have been lived, dreams that would never be realized, futures that were stolen by the war. And Zelthari losses? Helen asked. 212 ships confirmed destroyed. 4 dreadnoughts. 27 heavy cruisers. The rest, various smaller vessels. Intelligence estimates they lost over 100,000 soldiers in ground operations. More importantly, the cost ratio was completely unsustainable for them. Every engagement cost them more than they could afford to lose. Helen nodded slowly. It was a strange kind of victory, Humanity had lost more in absolute numbers. More people dead, more ships destroyed, more colonies damaged. But they had won the only victory that mattered. They had survived. They had forced the enemy to leave. They had proven that they could not be conquered. "What about Laura's daughter?" Helen asked. "Did anyone tell her?" Kate consulted her tablet. "Lisa Bennett is currently on Mars with her grandmother. She's been informed about her mother's death. The government has approved full military honors and survivor benefits." Helen thought about the recording Laura had sent. "Tell my daughter I love her. Tell her I fought for her future. I want to meet with her personally." "Set it up." "Yes, Admiral." Over the next few weeks, humanity began the long process of recovery. Ships were repaired or replaced. Colonies were rebuilt. The dead were counted and memorialized. It was a slow, painful process, made harder by the knowledge that everything could have been avoided if the Xelthari had never come. But there was also something new growing in human space. A sense of unity and purpose that had not existed before the war. Different colonies and factions that had been divided now worked together, bound by shared sacrifice. Political disagreements seemed smaller after fighting for survival together. Helen traveled to Mars for the memorial service. It was held in a vast open plaza that could hold thousands of people. Names were projected onto a massive wall, scrolling slowly. So many names. Too many names. Each one representing someone who had fought and died, refusing to surrender. At the base of the memorial, workers were installing a permanent plaque. Helen had insisted on specific words being included. Laura Bennett's words. From her final recording, "We proved that the Xelthari can be beaten. One ship, barely holding together, with a crew of 43 people, and we destroyed their flagship plus 18 other vessels. If every human ship, every station, every colony fights like we did, they can't win. They don't have enough ships. They've never faced an enemy that refuses to quit." Helen found Lisa Bennett in the crowd. She was 13 years old, standing with her grandmother, staring at her mother's name on the wall. Helen approached quietly and waited to be acknowledged. "Admiral Carter," Lisa said, recognizing her from pictures. "My mom talked about you. Your mother was one of the best officers I ever served with," Helen replied, "and one of the best friends I ever had. I'm sorry I couldn't save her." Lisa was quiet for a moment, looking back at the memorial wall. She made a choice, didn't she? She could have surrendered, but she chose to fight instead. "Yes," Helen said. "She chose to fight so that you could be free, so that all of us could be free." "Was it worth it?" Lisa asked, and Helen could hear the pain in her voice. 47 million people dead. My mom dead. Was it really worth it? Helen thought carefully about her answer. This was a child who had lost her mother. Nothing she said would make that pain go away. But she owed Lisa honesty. "Your mother thought it was worth it," Helen said. "She believed that some things are worth dying for. Freedom, the right to choose our own path, the right to say no when someone tries to force us to surrender. She believed that if we had given up, we would have lost something more important than our lives. We would have lost who we are, our ground. We would have lost who we are." Lisa wiped her eyes. "I hate that she's gone, but I understand why she did it. I wish I didn't understand, but I do." Helen put a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Your mother was brave, not because she wasn't afraid. I'm sure she was terrified, but because she did what needed to be done anyway. That's what real courage is." The memorial service began a few minutes later. Speaker after speaker stood up to talk about the war, about the losses, about the victory. But the words that stuck with Helen were from an unexpected source, a young ship captain named Chris Murphy, who had commanded a civilian freighter that had been converted into a warship. "We were told to surrender," Chris said to the assembled crowd. "The Xelthari told us we couldn't win. They told us resistance was pointless. They told us they would show mercy if we gave up. But Captain Bennett and the Defiant showed us something different. They showed us that we could fight, that we could hurt them, that we could win, even if winning just meant surviving. Chris paused, looking at the memorial wall. I flew a freighter. I wasn't a soldier. But when Protocol Defiance was announced, I knew what I had to do. My ship didn't have weapons, so we rammed a Xelthari cruiser that was attacking a refugee convoy. We destroyed them, and ourselves, but the refugees escaped. Was it worth it? I don't know, but I know that if we had all surrendered, those refugees would be dead or enslaved, and humanity would be on its knees. Helen listened and realized that this was the real legacy of Laura Bennett and the Defiant. Not just that they had fought and won one battle, but that they had inspired thousands of others to do the same, to refuse surrender even when it seemed rational, to fight even when the odds were impossible. 3 weeks after the memorial, Helen received a communication from deep space monitoring stations. The Xelthari had established a defensive line at the border of human space, but they were not advancing. More interesting, intelligence reports suggested internal problems in the Xelthari Empire. Some of their client species were showing signs of unrest, asking why they had surrendered when humans had shown resistance was possible. Helen smiled grimly. The war might be over, but its effects would ripple through the galaxy for years to come. Humanity had proven that the Xelthari could be beaten. Other species would learn from that example. She stood in her office, looking at a picture of Laura Bennett that she kept on her desk. It showed Laura smiling, taken years before the war, before any of them knew what was coming. We did it, Laura, Helen said quietly to the picture. We survived. We didn't surrender. We made them leave. You were right about everything. The cost had been terrible. Millions dead, entire worlds damaged, families torn apart. But humanity endured, not because they had better weapons or superior technology, but because they had refused to quit. Because when faced with the choice between freedom and survival, they had chosen freedom. Over the next year, human space slowly recovered. Ships were built. Colonies were resettled. New defenses were constructed along the border with Xelthari space. But the biggest change was not physical. It was in how humanity saw itself. Before the war, human colonies had been divided. Different governments, different agendas, different priorities. The war had forced them to work together, to sacrifice together, to fight together. That unity remained after the war ended, and throughout human space, on every ship and station and colony, people told the story of Captain Laura Bennett and the Defiant. They told how one ship, outnumbered and outgunned, had charged into an enemy fleet and destroyed their flagship. They told how that one act of defiance had inspired an entire species to resist. Children grew up learning about Protocol Defiance, about the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even when the odds seem impossible, about the value of freedom and the price of surrender. The memorial on Luna became one of the most visited sites in human space. People came from all over to see the names of those who had fallen, to read Laura Bennett's words carved in stone, to remember that humanity had faced extinction and refused to accept it. 5 years after the war ended, humanity had changed in ways both visible and invisible. The physical scars were slowly healing. Destroyed colonies had been rebuilt, though some were left as memorials to those who had died. New ships filled the space lanes, better designed and more heavily armed than before. Defense stations ringed every major world, ready to respond to any future threat. But the deeper changes were harder to see. They lived in how people thought about themselves and their place in the galaxy. Captain Eric Stone commanded the new vessel, Guardian, one of the first ships built after the war, specifically for defense. He sat in his quarters reviewing reports when his communication officer requested permission to enter. "Come in, Julie," Eric said. Lieutenant Julie Morgan stepped inside. She was young, had graduated from the academy after the war ended, but she had studied every battle extensively. "Sir, we're receiving a distress call. It's from a non-human ship. They're being attacked by raiders about 6 light hours from here." Eric stood up immediately. "Non-human? What species?" "They call themselves the Kelari. They're not part of any empire we know about. The message says they're merchants being attacked by pirates, and they're requesting any assistance." Eric thought about it. Before the war, human ships might have ignored such a call. Getting involved in alien problems could lead to complications. But after the war, humanity had a different perspective. They knew what it felt like to face overwhelming odds with no help coming. "Set course to intercept," Eric ordered. "Battle stations. Let's see what we're dealing with." The Guardian jumped to faster than light speed. When they emerged 6 hours later, they found exactly what the distress call had described. A small merchant vessel was surrounded by 3 raider ships. The merchant ship's shields were failing, and it was clear they would not last much longer. "Open communications with the raiders," Eric commanded. The main screen showed 3 alien captains, each from a different species. They looked surprised to see a human warship. "This is Captain Stone of the Earth vessel Guardian. You are attacking an unarmed merchant ship. Break off your attack immediately, or we will engage." One of the raider captains laughed. "Human ship, this is none of your concern. Leave now, and we will forget we saw you." Eric smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm going to give you one chance. Leave now, or learn why the Xelthari Empire withdrew from human space." The raiders looked at each other. Stories about the human war had spread throughout this region of space. Stories about ships that would rather die fighting than surrender. About a species that had turned suicide tactics into a military strategy and made it work. "You're bluffing," the raider captain said, but there was uncertainty in its voice. "You wouldn't destroy your own ship over a merchant vessel." "We destroyed our own ships to stop an empire," Eric replied calmly. "What makes you think we wouldn't do it to stop pirates? You have 10 seconds to withdraw." The raiders broke off and fled. Eric watched them go, then contacted the merchant vessel. "This is Captain Stone. Are you damaged?" The Kelari captain appeared on screen. Its species was tall and thin, with large eyes and delicate features. "Captain Stone, thank you. We did not expect help. Most species do not interfere in such matters. Humanity learned some hard lessons recently," Eric said. "One of them is that sometimes you need to stand up to bullies, even when it would be easier to look the other way. Do you need assistance with repairs?" The Kelari ship did need help, and the Guardian spent the next few hours providing it. During that time, Eric learned about the Kelari and their situation. They were a peaceful trading species, caught between larger powers that saw them as easy targets. "Your species fought the Xelthari Empire," the Kelari captain said, as they worked. "We heard the stories. We did not believe them at first. No one stands against the Xelthari. We stood against them," Eric confirmed. "And we survived. It cost us terribly, but we survived." "How?" the Kelari captain asked. "They are so much stronger." "How did you win?" Eric thought about how to explain it. "We didn't win through strength. We won by refusing to lose. Every ship, every station, every person fought as hard as they could. We made conquest so expensive that they gave up. It's not a strategy I would recommend. The cost was enormous, but it worked." The Kelari captain was quiet for a long time. "My species surrendered to larger powers 3 times in our history. Each time, we thought survival was more important than freedom. Each time, we lost a part of ourselves. I can't tell you what choices your people should make," Eric said. "But I can tell you this. After our war, humanity is different. We know we can stand up to anyone. We know we don't have to accept being victims. That knowledge, that certainty, It's worth more than any weapon. The conversation stayed with Eric long after the Kalari ship departed. He wrote a report about the encounter and sent it up the chain of command. Similar reports were coming in from other human ships. Everywhere they went, other species were asking about the war, about how humanity had resisted, about whether they could do the same. Back on Earth, Helen Carter now served as an advisor to the civilian government. She was in a meeting when she received Eric's report, along with dozens of others like it. A pattern was emerging. Humanity's refusal to surrender had inspired others. Species that had accepted domination were starting to question it. This could be a problem, one government official said. If we're seen as encouraging resistance throughout the galaxy, the major powers will view us as a threat. Helen shook her head. We're already seen as a threat. The Xelthari made sure of that. But now we have something more valuable than being liked. We have respect. Other species know that we can't be pushed around. She pulled up a map of local space. The balance of power in this region is changing. The Xelthari showed weakness when they withdrew from our space. Other empires noticed. Client species noticed. We didn't just defend ourselves. We demonstrated that empire building through conquest is not as easy as it used to be. Another official spoke up. What about the Kalari situation? Should we be helping them? Why shouldn't we? Helen asked. We're not starting conflicts. We're helping merchants against pirates. We're showing other species that there's an alternative to submission. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. The meeting continued. But Helen's mind wandered. She thought about Laura Bennett and the choice she had made 5 years ago. Laura had seen that humanity was facing extinction and decided that fighting was better than surrendering. That choice had rippled outward, changing not just humanity, but the entire region of space. On Mars, Lisa Bennett was now 18 years old and enrolled in the military academy. She stood in a classroom, listening to a lecture about the Defiant's last battle. The instructor was showing tactical analysis, breaking down every decision Captain Bennett had made. The key point, the instructor said, is that Captain Bennett understood the strategic situation completely. She knew she couldn't win the battle, but she also knew that winning the battle wasn't the objective. The objective was to hurt the enemy badly enough that others would be inspired to resist. Lisa raised her hand. Sir, my mother was Captain Bennett. I've read all her logs and reports. She didn't think about strategy that much. She just knew that surrendering was wrong. The instructor looked surprised. Miss Bennett, I didn't realize you were in this class. But with respect, the tactical analysis shows clear strategic thinking. Lisa shook her head. Maybe afterward people saw strategy in it. But at the time, she was just doing what she thought was right. She couldn't surrender because it would mean giving up everything we are. The strategy came from that moral choice, not the other way around. The classroom was silent. Then the instructor nodded. You're right. We've spent so much time analyzing the tactics that we've forgotten the most important part. Your mother made a moral choice. She decided that some things matter more than survival. The tactics followed from that decision. I see. Well, after class, several students approached Lisa. They wanted to know what her mother was really like, what she thought about before the final battle, whether she was scared. She was terrified, Lisa said honestly. She told me so, in a message she recorded before the battle. But she said being scared doesn't matter. What matters is doing the right thing, even when you're scared. One student asked the question everyone wondered about. Do you think she would make the same choice again? If she knew she would die? Lisa thought about her mother, about the recordings she had watched countless times, about the letters Laura had left for her. Yes, she would make the same choice, because for her, the alternative was worse than death. The alternative was teaching me that it's okay to give up, that survival is more important than principles, that you should kneel when someone stronger tells you to. She couldn't accept that. Word of this conversation spread through the academy. Young officers who would command the next generation of ships learned an important lesson. Tactics and strategy matter, but they flow from values and principles. Humanity had survived not through clever tactics, but through a refusal to compromise on what they believed in. In the Zelthari Empire, 5 years after their withdrawal, things were changing too. Supreme Commander Vrix had retired, replaced by younger commanders who had studied the human war extensively. They were redesigning their entire approach to expansion, recognizing that the old methods no longer worked. The Zelthari High Command now included a new division, specifically dedicated to understanding enemy morale and will to fight. They analyzed every species before engaging, trying to determine whether conquest would be economically viable. Humanity had taught them an expensive lesson about assuming victory. But there were other changes too. Several client species had requested greater autonomy within the Empire. Some had even suggested they might leave entirely. The threat was clear. They had seen humans resist and survive. If the Zelthari pushed too hard, their own empire might fracture. These ripples spread outward through the galaxy. Other aggressive empires noticed what happened with the Zelthari. They became more cautious about expansion, more willing to negotiate rather than conquer. The balance of power shifted subtly but significantly, and at the center of it all was the memory of one ship and one crew who had refused to surrender. Helen visited the Luna Memorial on the 5th anniversary of the war's end. Thousands of people were there, from all across human space. They came to remember the dead and to celebrate survival. Children who had been born after the war played around the memorial, unaware of how close they had come to never existing. Helen stood before the plaque with Laura Bennett's words. She had read them hundreds of times, but they still moved her. "We changed everything, Laura," Helen said quietly. "You and your crew. You made one choice, took one stand, and the whole galaxy shifted because of it." A young woman approached, wearing an academy uniform. It took Helen a moment to recognize Lisa Bennett, now grown and preparing to serve on her first ship. "Admiral Carter," Lisa said, "I wanted to thank you for everything you did during the war, for honoring my mother's memory." Helen smiled. "Your mother was a hero, Lisa. She gave us all a gift, the knowledge that we don't have to accept defeat, that we can stand up to anyone if we're willing to pay the price." "I'm going to serve on the Guardian," Lisa said. "Captain Stone's ship. I want to continue what my mother started." Helen looked at this young woman, seeing Laura in her features and bearing. "Your mother would be proud, not because you're joining the military, but because you're choosing your own path. That's what she fought for. The right for all of us to choose." As the ceremony began, Helen thought about the future. Humanity had survived its greatest test. They had been expected to surrender, and they had refused. That refusal had changed them forever, made them stronger and more united than ever before. The galaxy would never see humanity as easy prey again. And other species, inspired by humanity's example, were learning the same lessons. All because Captain Laura Bennett didn't so much as flinch. And in the Zelthari Empire, military academies studied the human war as an example of what happens when you underestimate your enemy. When you assume that overwhelming force guarantees victory. When you fail to understand that some species will choose death over surrender. Helen Carter eventually retired from military service. But she never stopped honoring the memory of those who had died. She gave speeches about the war, always emphasizing the same point. Victory had not come from being stronger or smarter. It had come from refusing to give up. Captain Laura Bennett had been expected to surrender when faced with impossible odds. Her crew had been expected to recognize they were beaten and beg for mercy. The Defiant had been expected to run or capitulate. They had done none of those things. They had fought to the very end, taking as many enemies with them as possible. And in doing so, they had changed the course of history. Humanity survived not because they won every battle, but because they never stopped fighting. That lesson would be remembered for generations to come. A young colonist approached him. A girl maybe 10 years old. "Sir, did we win?" Greg looked down at her, thinking about how to answer. They had lost millions of people, lost dozens of colonies. The Xelthari were withdrawing but not defeated, just deciding humanity was too troublesome to conquer. "Yes," he said finally. "We won. Not because we were stronger, but because we never stopped fighting." The girl nodded seriously and ran off to tell her friends. Greg watched her go, hoping that she would grow up in a galaxy where the Xelthari never returned, where humanity was known not as easy prey, but as the species that refused to surrender. Freighter Lucky Strike, carrying refugees from a fallen colony, was intercepted by a Xelthari cruiser. Instead of surrendering, the captain rammed the enemy ship at full speed, destroying both vessels but allowing the refugee convoy to escape. The garrison on Europa Station used their mining laser to slice a Xelthari destroyer in half before being overwhelmed. Every engagement cost the Xelthari ships. Sometimes, many ships. Word began to spread through human space. Stories of desperate last stands. Stories of impossible victories. Stories of humans who refused to give up. And slowly, very slowly, the mathematics of the war began to change. The Xelthari were winning battles, but each victory cost them more than they expected. They were taking territory, but holding it required forces they couldn't afford to spare. Helen watched the reports come in, each one a story of courage and sacrifice. She thought about Laura and the Defiant, about the choice to fight rather than surrender. It was working. Against all odds, it was actually working, and outnumbered, charging fearlessly into the heart of an enemy fleet. It showed that ship refusing to turn away, refusing to slow down, refusing to surrender. It showed the massive explosion that destroyed the enemy flagship. That recording spread through what remained of human space like wildfire. It reached Earth, where billions of people watched in amazement and grief. It reached the surviving colonies, where defenders saw proof that resistance was possible. It reached every human ship still fighting, every station still holding out, every commander wondering if they should give up. And it changed everything, because Captain Laura Bennett had been expected to surrender. Her crew had been expected to beg for mercy. The Defiant had been expected to recognize when it was beaten and give up. They had done none of those things. And in refusing to surrender, in choosing to fight to the absolute end, they had struck a blow that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. "All forward," Laura commanded. "Attack speed." The Defiant began to move, accelerating toward the massive enemy fleet. On Earth, and on every remaining human colony, people would later see the recordings of this moment. They would see one small ship charging into certain death. They would see it refuse to turn away. And they would remember that Captain Laura Bennett was expected to surrender. She didn't so much as flinch.